and welcome back to my channel, Fictional Latitude. I'm Deborah. Today we are going to have a quick look at the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction 2024 long list. It was announced yesterday. There are 16 books on the list. I haven't read a single one of them. I have heard about some of them via other booktube channels, reviews, you know, The Guardian, book section, whatever, but I haven't actually read any of them. There are now some of them on my shopping list when I go to London in a couple of weeks, which is going to cost me a fortune this trip. Anyway, it's worth it. It's books. So it's really exciting that we now have a non-fiction prize for women. As I say, it's the inaugural year, and the judging panel this year is chaired by Professor Susanna Lipscomb, who you've probably seen on various history documentaries, etc. And joining her are the fair fashion campaigner Venetia Lamanna, academic and author Professor Nicola Rollock, journalist Anna Seba, and the 2018 winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction, Camilla Shamsi. So I'm going to quickly just go through the 16 books, give an overview. As I say, I haven't read them, so this is either going to be what's come from the Women's Prize website, what I've read elsewhere, what I've heard elsewhere. It's just an overview of the books. So we'll start with Intervals by Marianne Brooker. And in 2009, her mother was diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis, which is, well, just doesn't bear thinking about really. She made a workshop of herself and her surroundings, combining creativity and activism in inventive ways. But naturally, because of the illness that she has, her ability to work and to move and to live without pain diminished drastically. And she wanted to die in her own home, on her own terms, and so she stopped eating and drinking, and she passed away in 2019. So this book looks into what makes a good death, what makes a good daughter, and about assisted suicides. The next is All That She Carried by Tia Miles. So in 1850s South Carolina, there was an enslaved woman called Rose, and she had a crisis. Her daughter was about to be sold. So she packed a cotton bag with a few items and ran away. Her daughter, her 9-year-old daughter, was separated from her and sold. And decades later, Ashley's granddaughter, Ruth, embroidered the family history on that cotton bag. So that's quite... So Tia Miles is an historian, and she traces the women's presence, which of course is very faint because not only were they women, but they were also slaves. So there's going to be very little about them personally. Sorry about the dog. In the archives. So she has to pull it all together to tell their story. So quite an interesting read there. Next is Wifedom by Anna Funder. Anna Funder loves George Orwell, who's one of her writing heroes. And so she was figuring out about how he created himself as a writer. And then she discovers the letters from Orwell's wife, Eileen O'Shaughnessy, to some of her friends. Now, I knew Orwell was married, but I didn't know anything about his wife. She was also a writer, and she had a big impact on George Orwell and how he wrote and so on. And of course, we heard very little about her. It's all focused on the man. So Anna Funder is bringing Eileen O'Shaughnessy back to the forefront. Now this is on my reading list, my book buying list, because I've just reread 1984, and I'm going to be buying also Julia, which is like the alternative view of 1984, looking at the woman's point of view. So I think this will be a nice trio on that subject. The next book is Shadows at Noon by Joya Chatterji. and it's an authoritative history of South Asia in the 20th century. It's looking at the story of the subcontinent from the time of the British Raj, the end of the British Raj, through independence and partition, with the forming of the three states of Pakistan, India and Bangladesh. And Chatterji is looking at it not just from the political viewpoint, but also from the everyday, from the food, from the way people live. And she's actually found a lot of commonality rather than differences between the three countries and their peoples. And it is said that it is written in a very accessible way, which sometimes history like that can be a little bit dense. But it sounds like it's going to be a good way of reading this. I'm sorry for all the creaking, but I'm on the daybed because I was having trouble with the light. But anyway, that's what's happening. Next is Codependent by Madhumita Murgia, and this is a look at AI. So this is absolutely relevant to now. And she's asking, what does it mean to be human in a world that's rapidly changing? And how does automated decision making, so when AI steps in and says, all right, we're going to do this rather than that, how does that affect our behaviour? And also, how does it affect us as individuals, communities and the wider society? So are we losing our own sense of agency and free will? So a very pertinent and maybe poignant, but I won't go into the video, book for now. Eve by Kat Bohannon answers questions scientists should have been but haven't been answering for a long time, and that's about the woman's body. So she has a look over 200 million years to explain the science behind the development of the female sex. So it is a revision of human history, and it's the same thing really. There's another one that's pretty similar about this, is the fact that the male body has been at the forefront, and really it should be a lot more about the women, because hang on, we give birth for a start. So for the scientists among you, you might find that of interest. A flat place, A Flat Place by Noreen Masood has two different ways of looking at it. It's the flat landscape that we may have within us, and the flat landscape, the literal flat landscape outside. So she is a Scottish Pakistani woman, and she loves flat landscapes because they tend to be stark in their beauty and quite calming, unlike mountains, which seem to be like peaks of rage, don't they really? So she's reflecting on her inner world, the flat place that she's inside herself, where she has emotional numbness and trauma that she suffered at childhood and so on. And she finds that Britain's landscape is actually a solace for this. So she's looks at it from that point of view. Now this next title is something of a stark one. Some People Need Killing by Patricia Evangelista. She's a journalist, and she is one who goes to the bad places in the world and reports on them. So she has been reporting on the Philippine drug war, and she spent 6 years there chronicling the murders or killings, depends on your viewpoint, carried out by police and vigilantes in the name of Duterte's war on drugs. Thousands of people died in this, so she's immersed herself in that world, and she's captured the atmosphere of fear when someone that you've actually elected as your leader decides you're not worthy of living and goes about and eradicates you. And the title comes from a vigilante that she spoke to who said, "I'm really not a bad guy. I'm not all bad. Some people need killing," which is quite frightening. really. The next one, Thunderclap by Laura Cumming. I've heard a lot about this, and I have to say it has intrigued me and is one that I will probably be picking up in London. So in 1654 there was a massive explosion in Delft in Holland, and it killed the painter Karel Fabritius, he who painted the Goldfinch, which you may know from Donna Tartt's book. He was only 32. And it nearly killed Johannes Vermeer as well. I don't know whether he painted Girl with the Pearl Earring at that point or not, but we could have been deprived of that work as well. Laura Cumming's father was also an artist, and he died at an early age as well. So she intertwines both the history of the Dutch Golden Age of art and her father, the story of her and her father, their relationship, and pulls them all together in what sounds like a really fascinating book. I know nothing really about Dutch art, so this is an area for me to improve my knowledge on. Next, The Dictionary People by Sarah Ogilvie. Well, what could be more exciting than a book about words? Not much, really. And I like the description that starts this. It does intrigue you, because you would think that the Oxford English Dictionary had been created by specialists, by professors, by people who deal with words all the time. But it isn't. It's created by the everyday people. And so the opening line is, what do three murderers, Karl Marx's daughter and a vegetarian vicar, have in common? They all helped create the Oxford English Dictionary. So it has a look at the contributors and the words that they've contributed to create the OED. And of course the OED always evolves, all dictionaries evolve. Next is Vulture Capitalism by Grace Blakely. And in this, Grace is a journalist. She has a look at the powerful corporations in the world who have basically created the crisis that we're in now, with our ongoing economic issues and all the fallout that comes from that. And she basically says capitalism isn't broken, capitalism is working just fine, thank you very much, because this is what they intended all the time. So from JP Morgan of banking fame to Boeing, Ford, Nixon, she tells us exactly where late stage capitalism has gone wrong or gone to plan, depending on your point of view. Another one that is going to be for me to purchase is Young Queens by Lee Redmond Chang. And this covers Catherine de Medici, Elizabeth de Valois, and Mary Queen of Scots, who were all in the French court at the same time. Mary had gone over to marry the French Dauphin. Catherine de Medici is a queen there. And then Elizabeth de Valois, she then ended up trotting off to Spain to become the queen there. So they've come from different places and they end up going to different places. But Chang has basically gone through the archives, got a lot of new research in there, and has found out a little bit more about these women at a time when, in the 16th century, you would be, as a woman, you had power and you really could have an impact, but at the same time, you were a chattel to be sold off to the just to stop a war, to have a new alliance. You were nothing, really. The Britannias by Alice Albinia is a geographical history, and this looks at the stories of Britain's islands, so like the Isle of Wight, the Isle of Man, the Orkney, Shetland, wherever, you name an island, Thanet, it even goes down to Thanet, and it has a look at the islands and how they've come together into our collective cultural psyche. So she goes over 5,000 years of history about the ancient mythology of the islands. We were ruled by women. and how that goes through the literature and then becomes subverted by male, the patriarchy. Here we go. So this pays homage to the beauty of the islands, their independence, and their suppressed and forgotten histories, i.e. that of women. Now, one thing that women do quite well, give birth. And Matrescence by Lucy Jones examines motherhood and how that affects women, their mind, brain and body. Because probably, people just think, oh, there you go, you get pregnant, you have a baby and there we go, job done. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. I haven't had any children, but friends have, and you can see how that affects them. This goes into it a lot more detail. Obviously, it's got research across neuroscience, evolutionary biology, psychoanalysis, sociology, economics, and Jones has a look into the changes in the maternal mind, how they're far more profound and enduring than any of us actually thought. I've had a little bit of a shuffle around, changing of the dog guard. Light went. Anyway. So, the next book is Doppelganger by Naomi Klein, and that I have heard a lot about on other booktube channels and as I say, in newspapers, etc. And I think this might make it onto the shortlist. But I haven't read it, so it's a guess. Anyway, so Naomi Klein discovered, she had an issue where, as she shared the first name with another woman who had some rather radical, dangerous views and opinions, sometimes people were confusing Naomi Klein with this other woman and sending her some not very pleasant messages. So at first she thought it was just too ridiculous to take seriously, and then she changed her mind. And so she went into the mirror world and followed her double to see what was going on. And she basically entered this world of conspiracy theories, anti-vaxxers, etc., etc. And this book looks at that element, but also how our culture has changed as we've become internet obsessed. There are deep fakes all over the place, and basically our democracy is being threatened by some of these online presences. As I say, this one has been talked about a lot. So I'm going, if I was a betting woman, which I sometimes am, but not very often, I would put money on this being on the shortlist. However, and the last one on the list, not the last, but the final of the 16, is How to Say Babylon, a Jamaican memoir by Sophia Sinclair. This book, and I've got to go through it, has been given the Best Book of 2023 title by the New York Times, Time, the Washington Post, Vulture, Shelf Awareness, Goodreads, Esquire, The Atlantic, NPR and Barack Obama. I'm going to say, just with that pedigree, that she's probably going to make it onto the shortlist as well, but we'll see. So Sinclair's father was a musician. He was a very volatile man. He followed one of these militant sects of the Rastafari. And he and his community were obsessed by what they call Babylon, which was the corrupting influences of the Western world. So he kept her and her mother and other siblings inside. They weren't allowed to go out. They weren't allowed to wear jewellery, makeup. They couldn't wear... I just said that. I just said they couldn't wear makeup or jewellery. Anyway, so they were very constrained in their life. But their mother did give them books and poetry. And Sinclair became quite dependent on that in order to get through her formative years. So in this book, Sinclair is looking at the culture which both nourished her and silenced her, and how she broke free, and about patriarchy and the legacy of colonialism in Jamaica. So those are the 16 books, and as I say, I haven't read a single one of these books. So my guess at what the shortlist will consist of is very much a guess. But I think it will be Naomi Klein's Doppelganger, Sinclair's Jamaican Memoir, Wifedom, Thunderclap, it's 4. I've forgotten what else I think it's going to be. Who are the other 2 that I think it's going to be? It's definitely going to be those 4. I think the other 2, it's kind of, I don't know. Doppelganger, Thunderclap, Wifedom. Okay, Eve. Because, right, there are 2 science books basically looking at motherhood and the female body. So it's either going to be Matrescence or Eve, and I think it's going to be Eve, mainly because I think it's going to go into, it's more wide-ranging, it's not just looking at motherhood. That's my guess. And the other one, which is more hopeful, I think, is Young Queens. But Professor Lipscomb is the chair, and she's a historian. And Tudors, I think, if I recall, are the period for which she's probably best known. But anyway, so she might go for that one. They're going to be so we can go back on the 27th of March. We can come back and see whether I've got it completely wrong, or whether by some absolute fluke, because I've not read a single one of them, I've got it right. But I'm fairly confident about 2 of them. So I will be, as I say, I will be picking up some of these when I go to London, but I'll be taking you with me. We'll have a little bit of a London travel vlog as well as book updates, and I will be diving into those at some point. And that's the dogs telling me it's time to go. So we shall end here, and I hope to see you again next time. Cheers, bye.